Ready? Hey everyone, it's Professor Jaq. Welcome to Generation Geek. This time around, we're going to be talking about the Man of Steel, the big blue Boy Scout. We're going after the granddaddy of all the long underwear superheroes, the man of tomorrow himself, Superman. Well, sort of. To be honest, while we will talk a bit about the character, I think it might be a bit more interesting to talk about his creators. I mean, Superman is ubiquitous. He's everywhere. His logo, that symbol on his chest, which is not the letter S, but instead the symbol of the House of L, which is basically his family, is one of the most recognized symbols in the world. As fictional characters go, only Mickey Mouse is more recognizable. But where did he come from? And the answer, of course, is Cleveland. Yeah, you thought I was going to say Krypton, didn't you? Krypton may be where the character came from, and that's incredibly important to our story. But the creators of the last son of Krypton, well, they met in Cleveland. It starts with Jerry Siegel. Born in 1914, the last of 6 children, young Jerry was a first-generation American. His father, Mikhail, and mother, Sora Siegelovich, were from Kaunas, specifically Viliampole, which was the Jewish section of town. They left because as Jews, this was a dangerous area for them. Always nice to know that Superman's dad was a Litvak, and his family was part of the first big Jewish migration. After a brief stop in New York and a change in name to sound more American, Michael Siegel moved by himself to Cleveland, where he set up shop as a tailor, a job he had learned from his own father. Eventually, he saved enough money to bring his wife, now Sarah, and their 2 children over. The move from Lithuania was good for the Siegels, who had 4 more children, Jerry being the last. It was also profitable, in that Michael's clothing shop was successful, eventually allowing the elder Siegel to buy a building and make a comfortable living to support his family. It also made him the target of thieves, and in June of 1932, during a robbery, Michael Siegel had a heart attack and died. Eventually, this would inspire his son to come up with a character who was invulnerable and immune to the dangers from petty thugs. For Jerry, though, he never quite fit in. He was an outsider all his life, preferring to read and imagine instead of play outside. He was a bit socially awkward as well. He tried to be part of several clubs and even the school paper at
Look, up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. It's Superman.
He tried to be part of several clubs and even the school paper at Glenville High School, but was ultimately not very successful. He did make one friend in high school, though, a boy his own age named Joe Shuster. Shuster came to Cleveland via Toronto, but, like Siegel, his parents came from Europe. His father was Dutch, while his mother was Ukrainian. Siegel and Shuster immediately hit it off, sharing a mutual love of adventure novels, movies, and science fiction. It was this last which really cemented their friendship. Both had read the 1928 issue of Amazing Stories featuring the first Buck Rogers story and started communicating with other science fiction fans they met in the letters column. They even started their own zine, one of the first, called, easily enough, Science Fiction. The division of labor was easy. Siegel was the wordsmith and Shuster the artist. Together, they came up with all sorts of different stories to fill their magazine, in the process gathering fans from others like Julius Schwartz and Mort Weisinger, who would also go on to have big names in the comic book field. In January of 1933, issue number 3 of Science Fiction featured a story called The Reign of the Superman. Here, though, the Superman in question wasn't the same guy we know and love today. Nope, this was a super smart villain, more like the character who would become Lex Luthor, Superman's arch rival. So Siegel would write the stories and Shuster would illustrate them. But it seemed that the best place for the team was in the funny pages. Writing and drawing a daily strip for the newspapers was the way to go. But no matter what they did, the duo could not break in. Not that they ever stopped trying. As the story goes, sometime in late 1933, Siegel couldn't sleep. He got out of bed and scrambled to his writing desk and jotted down some notes. After a little while, he went back to bed. Then he woke up again and the process continued. It was like this all night long until, in the morning, he ran over to Shuster's house with a brand new idea, that of Superman. They tried to sell it as a strip, but again, no go. So they put it on the back burner and tried a few other characters. 1938, the same people who were publishing Detective Comics were about to start a new series called Action, and someone remembered their test strips for Superman. Siegel got the call. Could they reconfigure the daily strips into a 13-page story? Siegel immediately agreed on behalf of the team and then got Shuster working on it. They were offered the going rate at the time, $10 a page, which included the rights to the characters they had developed. That's what all the publishers were doing. And even though they knew it wasn't a great deal, the boys figured they might not get another chance, so they accepted the offer, and the cover of Action Comics #1 became one of the most iconic images in comic book history. As Larry Ty says in his book, Superman, The High-Flying History of America's Most Enduring Hero, what the two Cleveland teenagers had done was inspired. They had reached into the melting pot of fantastic characters bubbling up in the 1930s, picking out the choicest features, then carefully reformulating them. Voila!
Superman!
A freshly minted man of tomorrow for a world not sure it had one. Superman was an alien shipped to Earth rather than an Earthling exploring the universe. And Jules Feiffer adds, in The Great Comic Book Heroes, the particular brilliance of Superman lay not only in the fact that he was the first of the superheroes, but in the concept of his alter ego. What made Superman different from the legion of imitators to follow was not that when he took off his clothes he could beat up everybody. They all did that. What made Superman extraordinary was his point of origin, Clark Kent. So what Siegel and Shuster did was give us nothing inherently new, but the combination and flipping of certain tropes hit the zeitgeist and created a legend. Clark Kent was his disguise, but he was really the hero. He was an alien on Earth, instead of an Earthman out in space. And ultimately, he really just wanted to do good things. To be fair, the first few stories were a bit more action-packed in terms of how far Superman would go to get his man, but he tempered it down pretty quickly. That first issue was a huge success and spawned immediate imitators. It didn't take long before Superman had his own self-titled comic book series, something which had never happened before, as well as appearing in every issue of Action. Soon, there was a radio show, a large balloon in the Thanksgiving Day parade, animated shorts, and yes, the boys even got Superman into the newspapers as a daily strip. By this point, war had broken out in Europe, and Look magazine asked Siegel and Shuster what would happen if Superman entered the war. They responded with a 2-page comic showing the Man of Steel rounding up Hitler and Mussolini and depositing them on the steps of The Hague to face war crime trials. This was a real problem. How could Superman not join up and fight? Easy. He fails his eye exam by using his X-ray vision to read the charts in the next room. With all of these various stories, though, Siegel had his hands full, but he was coping. Shuster, on the other hand, wasn't. His eyesight had never been great, and now, with the added pressure, he was having to rely more and more on other people to do the Superman artwork. And while the guys were doing okay financially, the comic publishers were making millions. Siegel asked for more money for himself and Shuster, and was rejected, eventually being forced away from his own creation by those same early friends in fandom, particularly Mort Weisinger, who had become Superman's editor. By then, though, while Superman was still being published, the rest of the superhero gang was gone, having lost their sense of purpose after the Second World War ended. And when the hero started to return in the 50s, thanks in no small part to Siegel and Shuster's old friend, Julius Schwartz, who is now the editor-in-chief over at DC, Shuster was nearly blind, and Siegel was angry at the world. It wasn't a good time for the boys from Cleveland. For one thing, they were now men, and they had seen their creation build an industry, seen that industry falter, and seen its rebirth. All the while, other people were making a lot of money from what they had come up with. That initial $130 payment had cost them a lot. Enough so that they were both now living in poverty and in ill health. It would take the efforts of the rising stars of the field they had helped create to finally make things a little better. In the mid-70s, the time was right for a Superman feature film. Technology had finally caught up to the character's heroic feats, and the tagline of the 1978 film starring Christopher Reeve in the title role was, "You'll believe a man can fly." And you could. Trust me, I was there.
Easy, miss. I've got you.
You've got me? Who's got you?
But as the film was getting ready, Siegel was busy promoting how insensitive Warner Brothers was and how they had basically stolen the character. His lament, although it was never a secret, really came to the forefront, and certainly the film company didn't want a publicity war on its hands. Comic artist Neil Adams, among others, seized the opportunity to get a better deal for Siegel and Shuster. When it was over, DC had agreed to give Siegel and Shuster an annual stipend, not much, but enough, and would grow with time. Health insurance, and most importantly, credit on all future Superman stories. It was a long journey, 40 years from creation to credit. But for the originators and everyone who has come since and gotten the benefit and credit, it was a fight worth having. Not bad for a couple of kids with one foot in the Eastern European countries like Lithuania of their past and one foot firmly planted in the future. I'm Professor Jaq, and you are part of Generation Geek. If you like what you just saw, remember to hit the subscribe button and click for notifications so that you'll know every time Generation Geek has a new video out. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media. We're there. And if you want to meet us in person, come check out Comic-Con Baltics this year. We'll see you there. And if you like my bow ties, handsome hobo neckwear, find them on Etsy.